Welcome to NextGen Tech, Talent and Trends by Sequoia Connect, the space where we explore with clarity and purpose the real impact of talent, technology, and artificial intelligence on organizations.
We are Silva, and today we invite you to reflect with us on the decisions shaping the present and future of the IT industry.
Here, we don't just discuss headhunting, AI, or tech consulting. We discuss what truly drives people, the need to grow, adapt, and lead.
This deep dive is for you if you're ready to take control of your career, lead change, or learn something new.
Let's get started. Okay, so let's unpack this. The source material we have today really takes a hard look at something that, well, often gets pushed aside in the scramble for top tech talent. We're talking about data privacy. The source calls it the invisible handshake, and the argument is pretty stark. It's become the absolute non-negotiable in recruitment today. It's about laws, yes, but more fundamentally, it's about keeping candidates safe.
That's exactly it. It's shifted, you know? Data privacy in hiring isn't just like ticking boxes anymore. It's the bedrock of trust. If someone doesn't trust you with their CV, well, they're definitely not trusting you with their entire career path.
Right.
And the main point here is, frankly, a bit brutal, your good intentions. They mean absolutely nothing when stacked up against data privacy law. Zero defense.
And to really drive this home, the source gives us a story. Let's call him Alex. It's a pretty catastrophic example of how this plays out in the real world. It's not just about some theoretical fine. This is about real lives getting seriously damaged by carelessness.
So tell us about Alex. How did this all start?
Okay, so the setup is something you probably see all the time in fast-paced IT staffing. Alex, highly skilled developer, right? Maybe cloud, maybe security, looking for that next big role. He's motivated, really wants to land something quickly.
Yeah, urgency is common.
Totally. So he sees this recruiter's post on LinkedIn. You know the type. Immediate connections, top IT jobs. It's tempting.
Very tempting. And Alex is eager, ready to jump through hoops to get that interview lined up.
And the first mistake, the thing that started the whole cascade, wasn't some sophisticated cyber tech, was it? It was something much more basic, done by someone who probably thought they were just being efficient.
Exactly. That's the tragedy of it. It wasn't malicious. It was negligence born from trying to move too fast. The recruiter asks Alex for his resume. Now think about what's in a resume.
Names, phone numbers, emails, work history.
Personal emails often linked to other accounts, financial stuff, social media, detailed timelines of where he lived, worked, sensitive stuff.
Okay.
And the recruiter says, just email it to my public email, like annette@gmail.com or maybe at Hotmail, not a corporate secured email address.
Just sends it off into the ether, basically.
Right. They just didn't prioritize setting up or using a secure corporate channel for that absolutely critical first data exchange, speed over safety.
So why is using a public domain like Gmail immediately a red flag for a proper staffing company? What's the actual risk there?
Well, there are two big things. First, your company email system. It's got centralized security, encryption usually, audit trails, who accessed what, when.
By a controlled environment.
Exactly. Gmail, Hotmail. They're built for consumers, not for protecting sensitive enterprise data under specific regulations.
Yeah.
Second, and this is key for compliance, using that public account often completely bypasses the company's own internal rules and legal checks.
Ah, so the company can't even monitor if the recruiter is following protocol.
Precisely. They have no visibility, no control. It's operating outside the safety net.
And that initial email, that simple act of negligence, was just the beginning. It got worse.
Oh yeah, it got much worse. The recruiter, juggling hundreds of candidates, trying to keep everything moving, makes the next critical error. They take Alex's resume and hundreds of others collected the same insecure way.
Oh, no.
And uploads them all to some generic cloud storage drive. Probably something public, easily accessible, maybe no proper password protection, no two-factor authentication, just out there.
So they basically created a giant unsecured treasure trove of personal data just sitting on the internet.
That's exactly what it was. A honeypot waiting to be found. And inevitably it was. Malicious actors found it, stole the data.
And because it wasn't just names, it was detailed work history, contact info.
Right. It allowed for incredibly targeted attacks, scams, phishing attempts. For Alex specifically, the consequences were devastating. Identity theft. Someone used his leaked details to try and access financial accounts, maybe apply for loans or credit cards in his name. The cleanup from that, it's a nightmare. Takes years sometimes, endless paperwork, constant stress.
It's financially ruinous for the individual, but the source material points out something even more disturbing, particularly in high-stakes tech recruitment. The risk can actually go beyond financial. It can become physical.
Yeah, this is the part that really makes you stop and think. It elevates the whole conversation. We're talking high-profile roles sometimes, right? Sensitive projects, maybe big financial firms, critical infrastructure, or roles in parts of the world where security is already a major concern. Okay. If that leaked CV contains enough personal detail, maybe an old home address, contact info for family members listed as references, location data, it could expose candidates to a genuine risk of, well, kidnapping, or targeted threats, coercion.
Wait, so let's be absolutely clear on this. You're saying a recruiter carelessly asking for a CV via Gmail could potentially lead to a situation where a candidate's physical safety is threatened.
That's precisely the risk highlighted. This data isn't just used for digital theft. It's fuel for social engineering, for real-world targeting. If bad actors know where you live, where you used to work, who your family is, they can craft incredibly convincing and dangerous schemes. This isn't just a data breach anymore. It's a potential breach of personal, physical security.
That is chilling. And predictably, when this all surfaced, Alex took legal action.
He did. And the fallout was immediate and severe. Alex sued the recruiter personally for negligence.
The individual recruiter.
Yes. The person who just wanted to fill the job fast. And he sued the company, of course. The company faced huge financial damages from the lawsuit, massive legal fees, but maybe even worse, their reputation was instantly shredded.
Gone overnight.
Completely. Clients wouldn't touch them. High-caliber candidates avoided them like the plague. The lesson here is crystal clear, and the source really hammers it. Being ignorant of the law or saying, "I meant well," is absolutely no defense when it comes to data privacy negligence. None.
So that single, seemingly small action, asking for a CV via the wrong email address, spirals into potential financial ruin for the candidate, a compromise of their personal integrity, massive fines and reputational death for the company, and horrifically even a risk to their physical safety. That invisible handshake you mentioned, it carries an enormous weight of liability.
It absolutely does. And Alex's story, that one leak, it just perfectly shows how data doesn't care about borders. Once it's out, it's global in an instant, which forces companies into this incredibly tangled web of international laws. And that leads us straight into the messy world of cross-border staffing and the legal tightrope companies have to walk.
Okay, let's shift gears then. We've seen the human cost through Alex's story. Now let's look at the actual rules, the legal and regulatory frameworks that companies, especially those doing nearshore or international IT staffing, absolutely have to deal with.
You said compliance isn't optional, it's existential.
It really is. It's the absolute foundation of trust. If you're placing talent across borders, nearshore, offshore, anywhere, you are legally bound to protect that personal data globally.
Yeah.
And the tricky part is, because data flows so easily, you often have to satisfy the rules of multiple countries at the same time. Sometimes those rules even conflict.
So let's ground this. A lot of nearshore IT work involves Mexico.
No way.
What's the main law companies need to know there?
Right. In Mexico, you absolutely have to start with the LFPDPP. That's the Ley Federal de Protección de Datos Personales en Posesión de los Particulares.
Sure.
It's a mouthful, but it's critical.
LFPDPPP, got it. This isn't just guidance. It's a strict mandatory law. If you handle any personal data, and every single CV counts, you have a core legal duty. The mandatory privacy notice. It's called the Aviso de Privacidad.
The Aviso de Privacidad, okay.
Oh.
And what does that notice actually empower the candidate to do? I keep hearing about RCO rights. What does that mean in practice when you're applying for a job?
This is where the Mexican law really gives power back to the individual. ARCO stands for access, rectification, cancellation, and opposition. These are your control mechanisms.
Okay, break those down. Access.
Access means you, the candidate, have the right to ask the company, hey, what data do you actually have on me? Where is it stored? Who's seen it? They have to tell you.
Rectification.
If the data they have is wrong, maybe they misspelled your name, got your previous job title wrong, you can demand they fix it immediately.
Okay, cancellation. That sounds important.
It's crucial. Cancellation means you have the right to tell the company, delete my data. Once the reason they collected it is over, say, you didn't get the job, or even if you did and left out, you can demand they completely remove your CV and all related info from their systems, their ATS, everywhere.
So they can't just keep your resume on file forever, just in case.
Not without your ongoing consent, and you have the right to withdraw that consent via cancellation. And finally, opposition.
Opposition.
This means you can object to your data being used for certain things. Maybe you applied for one specific job, role X. You can say, okay, consider me for role X, but don't put me in your general mailing list for future jobs or marketing emails. You can oppose those secondary uses.
So if a company holds on to a candidate's data for, say, 6 months after a hiring decision, hoping something else comes up, they need to be ready to hit delete the moment that candidate asks.
Absolutely. And they need the systems in place to actually do it and prove they did it. Because if they fail to respect these ARCO rights, the LFPD-PPP doesn't just mean administrative fines. It carries significant civil liability, meaning lawsuits and this is a big difference, potential criminal risks for serious negligence or deliberate misuse.
Criminal risks. Wow. That really raises the stakes beyond just a fine.
It absolutely does. It puts company directors potentially on the hook. Now, compare that to the U.S. Heading north, the situation is different. Messier, maybe. The big challenge is there's no single overarching federal privacy law like GDPR or LFPD-PPP.
Right. It's more like a patchwork quilt of laws.
Exactly. You have specific laws for specific sectors, like the Fair Credit Reporting Act, the FCRA. That's crucial for background checks. It dictates how you handle that sensitive report information, get consent, etc. But for the general candidate data, the stuff in the CV, you're looking mainly at state laws.
And the big one everyone talks about is California, right?
Yeah.
CCPA and now CPR.
Precisely. The California Consumer Privacy Act, CCPA, and the California Privacy Rights Act, CPRA, are really setting the standard in the U.S. and influencing laws elsewhere.
So how does CCPAC Perry specifically hit the recruitment process now? I heard there was an exemption for employees initially.
There was. Under CCPA, employee and job applicant data had a temporary carve-out, but the CPRA, which amended the CCPA, closed that loophole. As of January 2023, personal data collected from job applicants and employees in California is fully covered.
So what rights do California applicants have now?
They have rights very similar in spirit to ARCO, actually. The right to know what personal information is being collected about them, the right to access that information, the right to correct inaccurate information, the right to delete it, and significantly, the right to opt out of the sale or sharing of their personal information.
Sharing is a broad term. Does that cover sending a CV to a client?
It absolutely can, depending on the context and the agreements in place. It puts a much bigger burden on recruiters to be transparent about where candidate data is going.
And the penalties for getting it wrong under CPRA.
They're designed to be painful, especially in bulk. The law allows for statutory damages, meaning set amounts per violation, even without proving actual harm. It ranges from $100 to $750 per consumer, per incident.
Per incident, per person.
Yes. So if a company messes up and leaks, say, 1,000 resumes of California residents, you do the math, that could be up to $750,000 in statutory damages right there, before you even get to other costs. The potential liability scales incredibly fast.
Okay, Mexico, U.S. Now let's look across the pond to the one that casts a shadow everywhere, Europe's GDPR.
Even if a company isn't based in the EU, they still have to worry about it, right?
Oh, absolutely. The General Data Protection Regulation, GDPR, has serious global reach. If you're a U.S. or Mexican staffing firm, it clicks in the moment you recruit someone residing in the EU, or if you transfer data to or from a company based in the EU, or even if you're just monitoring the behavior of people in the EU, like tracking website visitors.
And what's its core principle regarding data? Consent is huge, and it must be explicit, informed, and unambiguous. But a major hurdle for international staffing is data transfer. GDPR strictly regulates moving personal data outside the European Economic Area, EEA.
So you'd just, email a list of potential German candidates to your client base in Mexico City?
Definitely not. Not without specific legal safeguards in place, because countries like the U.S. and Mexico currently lack what's called an adequacy decision from the EU, meaning the EU hasn't formally recognized their data protection laws as equivalent to GDPR.
So what safeguards do you need? This sounds complicated.
It is. The most common mechanism used now are standard contractual clauses, or SCCs. These are specific, pre-approved legal contracts provided by the European Commission.
Okay.
When you use SCCs, the company receiving the data outside the EU say, your client in Mexico has to contractually agree to protect that data using GDPR-level standards. They legally bind themselves to follow those rules, even though they aren't in the EU.
Wow. So every time you send a European candidate's profile to a non-EU client, you potentially need this complex legal contract signed and in place first.
That's the requirement for a compliant transfer, yes. It adds a significant layer of legal work and due diligence to every single international client relationship involving EU data.
And the fines for GDPR violations.
Yeah.
Those are the really scary ones, right? The ones that make headlines.
They are legendary and designed to be a deterrent. There are 2 tiers, but the maximum fine can be up to $20 million or 4% of the company's total worldwide annual revenue from the preceding year, whichever is higher.
4% of global revenue, that's potentially company ending.
It's an existential threat, plain and simple, and regulators are not afraid to impose massive fines. We've seen huge penalties levied against major U.S. tech companies for GDPR breaches, especially around data transfers.
Okay, so let's try and synthesize this. If you're an IT staffing company doing nearshore work, maybe placing Mexican developers with U.S. clients, but maybe also sourcing some specialists from Europe, you have to juggle Mexico's LFPD PPP with its RRC, or rights and criminal risk, the U.S.'s FCRA for background checks, and CCPAC PRA for Californian candidates, and GDPR's strict consent and data transfer rules using SECs if any EU data is involved.
That's exactly the tightrope. You essentially have to operate at the highest standard required by any of those laws, right? Your internal policies, your security, your contracts, they all have to meet the strictest requirements of all the jurisdictions you touch. You default to the toughest rulebook.
Which is why the source material insists compliance isn't just an HR task or an IT task. It has to be a core business strategy driven from the top.
Absolutely. It has to be baked into the company's DNA.
And yet, you still hear about companies dragging their feet, saying all this compliance stuff is just, red tape, friction, a cost center slowing things down when they need to hire fast. So let's flip the script. Let's talk about the business case for robust data privacy. How does this shift from being a legal burden to actually being a competitive advantage?
That's the key insight, because in an industry like tech talent, which runs entirely on relationships and trust, demonstrating strong data privacy practices becomes your ultimate differentiator. It signals something important.
What does it signal?
It signals stability, it signals ethical leadership, it signals that you respect the individual, not just see them as a data point to be monetized. And in today's market, top tech talent, they're savvy, they know about data breaches, they care about this stuff.
But wait, let me push back on that a little. Doesn't adding all these steps, getting explicit consent, providing that aviso de privacidad, maybe negotiating those complex SDCs with clients, doesn't that inherently slow down the hiring process? Recruiters need to move fast.
That's a great question, and it depends entirely on how you implement compliance. If you treat it reactively, like a bureaucratic checklist you tack on at the end, yes, it absolutely creates friction and slows you down. But if you build it in proactively, from the ground up, think automated consent workflows integrated right into your application portal. Clear, easy-to-understand privacy notices available upfront. Secure, pre-vetted data transfer mechanisms already established with your regular clients.
So front-loading the compliance work.
Exactly. If you do that, it actually removes friction later on. A fully compliant firm can often move faster with major clients because all that legal and security due diligence is already done. The trust is built in. The non-compliant firms, they're the ones getting bogged down in last-minute contract negotiations, or worse, getting rejected by clients who won't take the risk.
Okay, that makes sense. So let's list out the specific benefits. For the IT company or the recruiter themselves, beyond just avoiding fines, how does being compliant actually help them win?
Okay, first, the obvious. Yes, it dramatically reduces the risk of those catastrophic fines and lawsuits we talked about. That's table stakes. Second, the enhanced trust and reputation become tangible business assets.
How so?
Think about it. A good developer might get contacted by dozens of recruiters every week. Who are they going to respond to? The one using a generic Gmail address, or the one whose first contact includes a link to a clear privacy policy and uses a professional domain? It helps you attract better candidates, and they're more likely to stay engaged. It's a talent magnet.
And the international aspect.
Right. Being compliant, especially with standards like GDPR that require things like SECs, makes it much easier to work internationally. It opens up global talent pools and allows you to serve multinational clients seamlessly because you already meet those high international standards.
Okay, benefits for the company. Now, what about for the candidate? For Alex, in our story, what's the value proposition for them to choose a compliant recruiter?
For the candidate, it's fundamentally about protection and empowerment. First and foremost, protection from the nightmare impairment. Alex went through identity theft, fraud, the sheer emotional and financial toll of having your data misused.
Peace of mind, basically.
Huge peace of mind. But it's also about empowerment. Those RCO rights in Mexico, or the similar rights under CCPAC PRA and GDPR, they give the candidate control. They can find out what data is held, fix it if it's wrong, and, crucially, tell the company to delete it when it's no longer needed. You're not just leaving your digital footprint scattered everywhere indefinitely just because you applied for a job once.
It makes the candidate feel like a partner in the process, not just a commodity.
Exactly. It signals respect. A compliant firm values the candidate as a person, not just as potential placement fee.
Okay, let's revisit the dark side one more time just to make sure the risks of not doing this are crystal clear. The high cost of non-compliance. We know it's more than just fines.
Oh, much more. For the IT company or recruiter, you're looking at crippling financial costs, not just fines, but legal fees, remediation costs, maybe cybersecurity expert fees after a breach. Then there are the operational costs of dealing with investigations, rebuilding systems, and don't forget, specifically in the nearshore context with Mexico, that potential for actual criminal charges under LFPD-PPP. That's a risk that should keep executives up at night.
And the reputational hit. You mentioned it before, but how bad can it be in the tech world, which is often quite interconnected?
It can be fatal for the brand. In this digital age, news of a data breach involving candidate data spreads like wildfire on LinkedIn, tech forums, everywhere. Your company's credibility can be destroyed, literally overnight.
And clients react how?
Major clients, especially big enterprises in sensitive sectors like finance, healthcare, government contractors, they have their own compliance obligations. They simply cannot afford to work with a vendor, like a staffing firm, that poses a data security risk. They will drop you immediately. It's a required part of their own supply chain security. So you don't just lose candidate trust, you lose your entire revenue stream. It can lead to complete business failure.
Wow, okay. And let's loop back one last time to the impact on the candidate. We talked financial ruin from identity theft. But refresh our memory on the long-term effects and that worst-case physical safety scenario.
Right. Identity theft isn't a quick fix. It can mess up your credit score for years, making it hard to get loans, mortgages, sometimes even rent an apartment. It's a long, stressful slog to recover. But yes, we have to reemphasize that physical safety risk. It sounds extreme, but it's real.
How does it play out?
If sensitive location data, maybe from an old address on a CV or even detailed work location history, gets into the wrong hands, particularly for high-value individuals or those in certain regions, it creates a tangible risk. Malicious actors could use that information for targeted physical harm, extortion, or even, in the most severe cases cited, kidnapping. The company's sloppy data handling moves from being a business mistake to potentially facilitating a direct threat to someone's life.
And that connection, that direct line between a company's data security practices and a candidate's actual physical safety, that's what the source material really emphasizes, isn't it?
It's the core ethical point. The company's legal liability and the candidate's personal safety are two sides of the same coin. Those technical safeguards, the encryption, the access controls, the secure email, they aren't just protecting the company's bank account. They're literally part of the mechanism protecting the human beings they interact with.
So it fundamentally changes the perspective. This isn't just IT policy or legal paperwork, it's risk mitigation at a human level. When you realize that spreadsheet of candidates could, if leaked, put someone in physical danger.
Exactly. Suddenly, investing in secure systems, in proper training, in compliant processes, it stops being a nice-to-have or a cost to be minimized. It becomes a fundamental, non-negotiable ethical and operational requirement.
Okay, this is heavy stuff, but incredibly important. Given this reality, let's make it practical. We need to give our listeners some concrete, actionable steps they can take right now. Whether they're looking for a job or they're involved in hiring, let's create some checklists.
Good idea. Let's move from the problem to the immediate solutions. We need to empower both sides of the equation. Where should we start? Candidate or company?
Let's start with the candidate. They're the ones providing the sensitive information. So checklist for the candidate. Protect yourself. What's step number one? You mentioned it earlier, but let's make it explicit.
Step one, absolutely critical. Check the domain. Before you hit send on that email with your CV, look at the recruiter's email address. Is it something like at companyname.com? Or is it at gmail.com, at yahoo.com, at hotmail.com?
And if it's one of those public domains?
Never send your CV or any sensitive documents to a public email domain when dealing with a recruiter or potential employer. Just don't do it. A legitimate security-conscious organization will use a professional corporate domain. If they insist on using Gmail, that's a massive red flag about their internal security practices. Walk away or at least demand a corporate address.
Okay, check the domain. Non-negotiable. Step two for the candidate.
Demand the notice. You have the right to know how your data will be used and protected. Ask for the company's privacy policy. If you're dealing with a Mexican company or data subject to LFPD-PPP, specifically ask for the aviso de privacidad.
And what should you look for in that notice?
A legitimate company will have one readily available, usually on their website or application portal. Read it. Does it clearly explain why they want your data, how long they'll keep it, how they protect it, and crucially, does it tell you exactly how you can exercise your rights, like access, correction, deletion, ARCO? If they can't provide a clear notice, or if it's vague and confusing, that's another big warning sign. They're likely not compliant.
Okay, demand the notice. Makes sense. Step 3. Seems recruiters often ask for a lot of info up front.
Exactly. Step 3 is limit the data you provide initially. Think data minimization. Only give the absolute minimum information needed for the current stage of the process, for that first contact. A summary of your experience, your key skills, and basic contact info should be enough.
So don't send everything but the kitchen sink right away.
Definitely not. Do not send highly sensitive identifiers like copies of your national ID card, driver's license, passport, social security number, or detailed bank information early on. Wait until you have a formal written job offer and the background check process is initiated by a verified, legitimate employer through a secure, compliant channel. That's when that level of data might be legally required, not usually before. Protect your most sensitive data until absolutely necessary.
Okay, great advice for candidates. Now let's flip it. Checklist for the recruiter IT company. Build trust and compliance. What's the first most fundamental step for the company?
Step 1 is non-negotiable, especially if touching Mexican data, but honestly, it's best practice everywhere. Implement a clear and comprehensive privacy notice. In Mexico, it's the mandatory aviso de privacidad.
And what makes a good notice?
It needs to be more than just legal boilerplate. It must be easy for a candidate to find and understand. It has to clearly state exactly why you're collecting the data, e.g., for assess your suitability for role X and related roles for 12 months. It must state how long you'll keep it, the security measures in place, and critically, provide a simple, direct process for the candidate to exercise all their rights. ARCO, deletion, opt-out, whatever applies under the relevant laws. It should be a practical guide for the candidate.
Okay, get the notice right. Step 2 directly addresses the Alex scenario. Securing how data is shared and stored. What does that mean in practice?
It means stop using public email domains and unsecured storage immediately. Full stop. All recruitment activity involving candidate data must happen through secure, company-controlled channels. Use your corporate email system. Store resumes and candidate profiles in a secure, access-controlled, preferably encrypted system, ideally, a purpose-built, compliant applicant tracking system, ATS.
And what about when you share that profile with a client?
That's critical. You can't just email it over and wash your hands. Step 2 also means secure your data sharing with clients. You must ensure that your client is contractually obligated to protect that candidate's data to the same high standard you do.
How do you do that?
This usually requires specific legal agreements like data processing agreements, DPAs. If EU data is involved, you'll likely need those standard contractual clauses, SCCs we discussed. These contracts legally bind the client to handle the data properly, respect candidate rights, and notify you if there's a breach on their end. You have to ensure the protection travels with the data.
That puts a significant onus on the recruitment firm to vet their clients' practices, too.
It does. Under laws like GDPR, you can be held liable if your client mishandles the data you sent them. It's called controller-processor liability. So finally, step 3 addresses the weakest link, the human factor.
But if ignorance isn't a defense, you have to eliminate the ignorance. Step 3 is train your team.
Absolutely. And not just once during onboarding. Training needs to be ongoing, comprehensive, and mandatory for everyone who touches candidate data: recruiters, sourcers, coordinators, managers.
What should the training cover?
It needs to cover the specifics of the relevant laws: LFPD, PP, FCRA, CCPAC, PRA, GDPR, depending on your operations. But crucially, it can't just be dry legal text. It needs practical, real-world examples. Use stories like Alex's. Show them why these rules exist. Emphasize that one careless click, one email to the wrong address, one file saved in the wrong place can lead to devastating consequences for the candidate and potentially existential risk for the company. Make it clear that compliance is part of their job performance.
Maybe even tie compliance adherence to performance reviews or bonuses.
That's certainly one way to reinforce its importance. Regular refreshers, maybe short quizzes, practical scenarios, whatever it takes to make data privacy best practices an ingrained habit, not an afterthought.
This all sounds like a significant investment, especially for smaller or rapidly growing firms trying to keep up with global demand. It really underlines the point about needing specialized expertise.
It really does, and that leads directly to the source material's emphasis on the necessity of a compliant partner. For many companies, especially those operating across multiple complex legal jurisdictions like Mexico, LFPDPP, the US, state laws, FCRA, and potentially Europe, GDPR, trying to maintain that level of specialized legal and technical compliance knowledge in-house is incredibly difficult and expensive.
It's a full-time job just keeping up with the changes.
Exactly. The source is very clear on this. In today's environment, partnering with a staffing provider that is already fully compliant, that has already invested in the secure systems, the legal frameworks like DPAs and SECs, and the trained personnel is no longer a luxury item. It's become a fundamental risk reduction strategy.
Because if you hire a staffing partner that isn't compliant, and they have a data breach involving candidates they sourced for you,
Then you, the client company, could be dragged right into the middle of it. You could face liability, reputational damage, legal headaches, all because your partner didn't have their house in order.
so choosing a partner based on their proven compliance posture is essentially outsourcing a huge chunk of complex risk management.
Precisely. A truly compliant partner has already built the necessary infrastructure. They manage the data processing agreements. They conduct the security audits. They have processes to handle RCO requests efficiently. It allows you, the client, to focus on your core business and talent strategy, knowing that this critical compliance piece is being handled professionally and reducing your overall risk exposure significantly.
Okay, so looking forward now, we've covered the current landscape, the risks, the laws, the best practices. But technology doesn't stand still. The source material points out that things like AI and recruitment and the massive shift to remote work are creating new challenges, stretching these existing privacy frameworks.
They absolutely are. The game is constantly changing, and the IT and HR communities need to be thinking ahead, addressing some really thorny questions right now. If we don't, we risk falling behind, and those good intention breaches like Alex's could become even more common.
So what are some of those key challenges the source highlights? Let's start with the practical difficulty of managing data across borders, especially with nearshore teams. We talked about contracts, but how do you ensure they're actually followed?
Right. It's one thing to have a signed DPA or SECs with your international client or your own nearshore delivery center. It's another thing entirely to ensure those contractual promises translate into real-world operational security, especially when dealing with strict laws like Mexico's LFPD PPP.
So the question's about enforcement and verification.
Exactly. The challenge is, what specific enforceable mechanism beyond just the standard contract language are companies putting in place with their international partners to guarantee data protection integrity? And maybe even more pointedly, how do you audit that a partner in another country, say a U.S. client receiving Mexican candidate data, actually has the technical and procedural capability to properly handle something like an LFPD PPPP RRCO request within the legally required timeframe?
Because that U.S. client might not even have cancellation or opposition built into their standard workflows if they primarily operate under U.S. law.
Precisely. The contract might say they have to, but if their systems can't physically do it, the right is meaningless. So enforcement might require more proactive measures, maybe detailed security questionnaires for partners, maybe requesting documentation of their data handling procedures, perhaps even reserving the right to conduct periodic audits, specifically focused on how they track, verify, and fulfill rights requests from candidates in different jurisdictions. The trust needs verification.
Okay, that's a big operational challenge. The second major challenge highlighted seems like a direct clash. The rise of AI tools versus a core privacy principle.
Yes, this is a huge one. AI tools and data minimization. Data minimization is fundamental to privacy laws like GDPR. It means you should only collect and process the personal data that is strictly necessary for the specific purpose you identified.
Collect only what you need.
Right. But the problem is, many of the powerful new AI-driven applicant tracking systems and candidate sourcing tools are designed to do the exact opposite. They work better, their algorithms learn faster when they ingest massive amounts of data. They often scrape data from multiple sources, aggregate it, and want to hold on to it to refine their models. They inherently encourage collecting more data, not less.
So you have the law saying less is more and the technology saying more is better. How do companies reconcile that?
That's the multi-billion-dollar question the industry is grappling with. How do you effectively enforce data minimization when the very tools you're buying to improve efficiency are pushing you in the opposite direction? What's the solution here?
Are there technical fixes? Or is it just policy?
It likely needs both. The community needs to figure out the most effective approach. Is it pushing AI vendors to build privacy by design into their tools from the start? Maybe using techniques like data masking or tokenization during the AI training phase so the models learn patterns without storing identifiable personal data? Is it companies setting strict internal policies that simply forbid collecting certain non-essential data fields, even if the AI tool could capture them? Or perhaps exploring the use of synthetic data, artificially generated data, to train AI models instead of using real candidate information? There needs to be innovation here, combining policy controls with technological solutions.
Fascinating challenge. And the final challenge identified brings us right back to the human element, especially with so many teams working remotely or in hybrid models. Preventing those accidental good intention breaches.
Yeah, the distributed workforce definitely amplifies the risk. We know that convenience often trumps security when people are working from home, maybe using personal devices or networks. So the challenge is, how do you effectively train remote and hybrid teams to consistently avoid those common, simple mistakes? Things like, again, sharing candidate lists via unsecured personal cloud storage or defaulting to a public email address for a quick initial outreach because it's easier than logging into the VPN and using the corporate system.
We talked about training earlier, but the point here is about measuring if it's actually working, right?
Yeah,
Not just the people attending.
exactly. The traditional check-the-box annual security training often doesn't stick. So if the risk of one of these simple breaches is potentially catastrophic, how do you actually measure the effectiveness of your training in changing behavior? What metrics prove that people are internalizing the lessons and consistently choosing a secure path over the convenient one?
What would those metrics look like?
Maybe things like internal phishing simulation results. Do people click the bad link? Monitoring attempts to access sensitive data from unauthorized locations or devices, tracking the use of non-approved software or cloud services for work tasks, running audits on email usage patterns to flag inappropriate use of public domains for business. And, crucially, making adherence to these security protocols a visible and measured part of performance management. If someone repeatedly fails internal security checks, it needs to be addressed just as seriously as any other performance issue, because the potential damage they could cause is immense.
So really embedding security culture into the performance culture.
It has to be, especially in a remote environment.
Wow. Okay, this has been incredibly thorough. We've gone from the personal impact of a single leak through the maze of international laws, the business case for compliance, practical steps, and now these significant future challenges with AI and remote work. It really underscores how central data privacy has become. Before we go to the outro, what's the one final, maybe provocative thought you want to leave our listeners with, building on all this?
Okay, building on everything, and particularly that idea from the source about the invisible handshake, consider this. If data privacy truly is the foundation of trust in this next-gen tech world, then perhaps the single most accurate predictor of an organization's long-term ethical character, its operational integrity, and ultimately its future success is how meticulously it protects candidate data today. How a company handles your information when you're just applying. That might tell you everything you really need to know about how they'll handle their business, their clients, and ultimately your career if you join them. Watch the handshake.
This was NextGen Tech, Talent and Trends.
Thank you for joining us in this conversation where knowledge becomes direction.
I hope this deep dive offered you a useful pause, perhaps a boost of inspiration, or maybe even just a starting point for thinking about what's ahead in your own work.
We certainly hope we've left you with some ideas, maybe some new questions, and most importantly, that drive to keep building your path in this ever-evolving world of technology and talent.
Leave us a comment. Share this with your colleagues in your team, and please help us keep growing this important conversation.
You can follow us on social media at Sequoia Connect, and always remember, the future doesn't just happen, it's built consciously with talent, technology, and real purpose.
We are Silva, and we'll catch you in the next episode.